Chapter 7. Crossing the Lidenbrook Sea. The wind blew our raft along quickly. By the end of the next day we had left the coast far behind. We had travelled 145 kilometres on the Lidenbrook Sea. Hans decided to try fishing. He tied a hook onto the end of a rope, put some meat on it, and threw it into the sea. At first nothing happened. Perhaps there was no life in these waters. But then Hans felt a tug on the line. He pulled it in, and landed a fish on the deck on our raft. It had a flat head, but no tail. The strangest thing was that it had no eyes. My uncle examined it carefully.
"This fish belongs to a family of fish which no longer lives on earth," he said. "This fish is extinct."
I was very excited by this news. To think that we had caught a fish that only existed as a fossil on earth. I wondered what other wonderful creatures we would meet on our voyage on this sea. We might see lizards or whales or birds that lived on the earth millions of years ago. I started to dream of these fantastic creatures. It was wonderful to be out on the open sea. Our days in the darkness of the rocks under Sneffels seemed far away. My uncle tried to find out how deep the sea was. He tied a pickaxe to the end of a long rope and threw it into the sea. It did not touch the bottom, but when we pulled it up, Hans pointed to marks on the pickaxe. "Teeth," he said. What terrible monster had bitten into the iron of the pickaxe? We looked at each other in fear. Night came again, and I fell asleep. However, I was awakened suddenly. The raft had been lifted out of the water. A huge sea monster had thrown us into the air. As we looked, we saw two other sea monsters. They were coming towards us. Were they going to attack? I picked up my gun, but it would be useless against these creatures. We could not escape. We were terrified. Surely this was the end of our journey beneath the earth. But the sea monsters did not attack us. They attacked each other. They fought fiercely. Huge waves threw our raft up and down. The fight lasted for 2 or 3 hours. We watched in fear. Which monster would win this fight? And would it then go on to attack us? We had no chance of escaping. Suddenly, the two sea monsters disappeared beneath the sea. Then the head of one of them appeared again. It twisted its long neck from left to right. It looked as if it was in great pain. The waves rose higher and higher. Gradually it moved more slowly. At last it stretched out on the surface of the water. It was dead. We continued our voyage. We were glad to escape the anger of the sea monsters. For 2 days we sailed on. Then on the 3rd day we heard a roaring noise. We saw a huge fountain of water rising from the sea. It was many kilometres away. Was it another sea monster? If so, it must be even bigger than the ones we had already seen. I wanted to sail as far away as possible, but my uncle had other ideas. He told Hans to go straight ahead. As we got closer, we saw a huge dark shape in the sea. It was as high as a mountain, and at least 2 kilometres long. I was terrified. I had never seen an animal as big as this. Suddenly Hans stood up and pointed to the shape. "It's an island," he said, "and the fountain of water is a geyser." We landed on the island and began to explore it. We were careful to avoid the geyser. The ground trembled under our feet, and it was very hot. My uncle named the island after me. Soon we set sail again, leaving Axel Island behind us. After a few hours there was a change in the weather. I could see dark clouds coming towards us. Lightning flashed behind the clouds. I turned to my uncle. "There's going to be a storm," I said. "We should lower the sail and take down the mast."
"No, never," my uncle cried.
"Let the storm take us away." Immediately the storm hit us. The rain poured over us. The raft was thrown up in the air. Then the wind blew us forward at a great speed. For 3 days we were at the mercy of the storm. A ball of fire suddenly appeared in the sky. It was coming straight towards us. It burst as it hit our raft. Everything was covered in blue flames. Then I fainted and remembered no more. When I woke up, the storm had stopped and the sea was calm. In front of us we could see a shore. We had crossed the Lidenbrock Sea. We landed and rested on the shore. Next morning we set out to explore the shore. We walked inland and soon came to a range of hills. The bones of extinct animals lay all around us. My uncle found the skull of a human. It was amazing. Men had lived on the shores of this sea thousands of years ago. We came to a forest of strange trees. The forest was not green, but pale yellow, like the colour of sand. The trees had no lower branches, and you could see through the forest. Suddenly I stopped, and put my hand on my uncle's arm to warn him. I could see huge shapes moving about in the trees. When I approached, I saw giant animals. They looked like elephants, but they were much bigger, and they had longer tusks. I recognized them from pictures in my science books. They were mammoths, which had died out on the earth thousands of years ago. When my uncle saw them, he wanted to approach them, but I did not want to get any closer. "These animals are dangerous," I said. "No man would risk his life with them."
"You are wrong, Axel," my uncle replied. "Look over there. I can see something that looks like a man."
He pointed to one of the giant trees. A man was leaning against it. He was more than 3 meters tall, and he had long hair. He held a long stick in his hand. He was looking after the herd of mammoths, just as a shepherd looks after his flock of sheep. We stood there for a few moments, unable to believe what we had seen. But what if this giant shepherd saw us? I was afraid, and I pulled my uncle's arm. "Come on," I cried. "Back to the raft." For once my uncle did what I asked him to do. We ran as fast as we could back to the Lidenbrock Sea.